Shalom Mishpacha, and welcome back to another Torah Tea Time, where I'm going to drink cups of tea and talk about all things Torah with you. I also want to tell you a little bit about the kind of tea I am drinking and the kind of cup I'm drinking it from. Back in Europe, I got to know this very delectable tea brand called Kusmi tea, which is a French tea brand, and it comes in a beautiful box like this. You can get it in tea bag form or in loose leaf, and it makes for a wonderful tea, and this box was given to me by dear congregants. And today I'm having label Impérial, mélange aromatisé de thé vert, orange, cannelle et épices. In other words, an aromatic mix of green tea with orange, cinnamon and spices. This is what the tea bag looks like. So I made sure that my tea water is no longer boiling because it's green tea and I don't want to scorch the tea. So I'm going to open this little bag and put it in my teapot. This is what it looks like. And it smells delicious. Perfect for a little afternoon pick-me-up. The tea cup I'm drinking from was actually given to me by a dear friend, and it is from Spode, their Creatures of Curiosity line, and it's really fun. It's one of their newer lines, and it comes in this kind of Victorian botanical theme, and it's really pretty and it drinks really well. The only caveat is this needs to be washed by hand. So if that's a concern to you, I wouldn't get this, but Spode's stuff is absolutely great and at a very reasonable price point. So that is going to be my cup of tea for today. As my tea is steeping, I wanted to talk to you about kind of a really big Jewish topic that I know a lot of people struggle with. Whether you grew up in the Jewish community and all the traditions, or you entered the Jewish community at a later stage and came to take on the traditions and practices of Judaism on your own, the thing I want to talk to you about today is, drumroll, imposter syndrome. What is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is a cognitive bias that we can apply to ourselves where we think we're actually less competent and able than we are. And it really self-limits ourselves. It makes us feel uncomfortable in different situations, especially new situations, and it really holds us back. Now, we can have imposter bias in all kinds of situations, and I suspect, though I haven't researched this, that actually the more you know about a topic or a subject or a situation, the bigger your imposter bias can be. Maybe imposter bias is actually a symptom of you knowing more than you think. Be what may, you can research imposter bias for yourself, but I wanted to talk about it a little bit in the context of Jewish community because it is incredibly common. Now, how did I find out about imposter bias? You're never gonna guess it, because until a few years ago, I knew the phenomenon, but I didn't know there was a term. I actually found out about it through the rabbinate, through rabbinic colleagues who said, I'm feeling huge imposter bias right now. Imagine that, people who went through 5 years of rigorous training to be ordained as rabbis suffer from imposter bias. And yes, it's true. We rabbis suffer from imposter bias all the time. And I want to share that with you to kind of puncture any false inflated expectations we may have. It's really okay to suffer from imposter bias. It's incredibly common. And even those of us in leadership, to this day, after a decade of being a rabbi, I still suffer from imposter bias. You might wonder, what hope is there for the rest of us? Well, I'm here to tell you that there is plenty of hope. I want us to reflect a little bit on a few possible explanations of where imposter bias comes from and what we might do about it. Modern Judaism is an incredibly intellectually grounded tradition. Judaism as a whole has always been very rooted in text, analysis, questioning, arcane and complex ritual, a strange and foreign language with an uncomfortably difficult alphabet to learn, and woven through the modern experience where we often tend to ascribe great value and meaning to academic learning, you can easily see why some people might have imposter bias. The Jewish experience is very rooted in complex ideas and complex practices. And so it's no wonder that if you are participating in the Jewish community, you might feel, oh my gosh, there is so much to learn. I am feeling so much imposter bias right now, because how am I ever going to learn it? We rabbis and teachers often talk about the ocean of Talmud, and there's actually an amazing poster which kind of maps out the chains of transmission of traditional learning in the form of an ocean. And we are all sticking our toe in this ocean of learning, but that can only add to our sense of imposter bias, right? Because, oh my God, if there is an ocean of learning, how am I ever going to master it? Well, friends, the secret is you don't have to master it all. Like an ocean, you can swim in it on your own terms to whatever degree you want. Some of us stay very close to the shoreline. Others stick in their feet. Others are a little more daring and venture a little further out. But I think that tends to be one of the explanations why we are prone to experiencing imposter bias in the Jewish community. Another explanation is that none of us like feeling incompetent. And the more competence you gain in other aspects of your life, the harder it may be to admit less knowledge or less grounding in the area of Judaism. So you might be a completely well-rounded, competent adult in any other aspect of your life. You hold down a career or a job, you're raising a family, you're doing pretty good. And then, you enter a synagogue for the first time. And the music is strange, and the language is strange, and the rituals are strange, and you don't know anybody, and you feel huge imposter bias. Even and especially if you grew up in the Jewish community, and you might have internalized notions of, well, shouldn't I know this stuff by now? Well, the answer to that may very well be no. You might not have had as much exposure as you think you might have, or maybe nobody actually really explained it to you in a way that worked for you. Or do you actually know the structure of the prayer book? If you don't, no wonder you feel lost. And for those of us who are entering Jewish spaces for the first time or the first number of times, are we sure that there is someone to guide us through that experience? Do we have certain expectations before we come into that space that might add to our feelings of inadequacy? And those are all ways in which imposter bias can make itself manifest in our lives. I'm steeping my tea, and it's a beautiful pale green gold. And now I'm going to pour some. It smells amazing, really delicate and aromatic and flavorful, but also very light. Usually black teas that have been decorated with spices can be a little heavy, but this is a green tea. So I'm really expecting this to hit the spot for tea time late in the afternoon. Having explored a little bit why we might have imposter bias, what are we going to do about it? You know, there are things we can do about it communally and institutionally. Have transliterated resources, make sure that we have ushers in synagogues that make people feel welcome, offer education at all levels, from a taste to Judaism to an intro to Judaism class to intermediate forms of learning and advanced forms of learning, creating a culture of welcome and friendship, creating a culture of non-judgment, inviting members of Jewish spaces to step outside of themselves and imagine themselves in the shoes of another person. Those are all really excellent ways to try and lower the temperature on the experience of entering a Jewish space. How about for us as individuals? How can we reduce imposter bias in our lives? Well, I think there is a great antidote. And this is actually something that comes from Eastern traditions and Buddhist philosophy. and that is called having beginner's mind. Beginner's mind is not just that you're beginning on a learning journey and things might be new to you. It is about the attitude with which you enter this space of new learning. It is an attitude of non-judgment, of self-compassion, of curiosity, of reserving snap judgments about yourself and saying, you know what, I may not know that. That is actually not a detriment. It's an asset. It allows me to ask the obvious questions that people think people ask but don't actually ask. It allows me to see things from new vantage points. It allows me to freshen up the space of learning for experienced learners in this space already. It allows me to sit back compassionately and lovingly with myself and say, it's okay that I don't know this. It really is. What can I examine about myself? My own triggers, my own expectations. And it is a reminder that whatever judgment we put on ourselves usually is far less than what we project other people to think of us. Frankly, most people aren't actually that judgmental and don't really care. Often that is a feeling that we live with, and consciously telling ourselves it's not that bad. I'm gonna mess up and nobody cares, and I'm going to feel like I've messed up and still nobody cares, and I'm going to really take apart, have I actually messed up, or is this just a new experience I'm having? Of course, another way to deal with imposter bias is education and educating yourself. Luckily, we live in a time of the internet, and there is a plethora of Jewish learning resources available. If you're very new to Judaism, or even if you're not, myjewishlearning.com is a great Jewish learning portal. But also books about Jewish prayer and liturgy, like this one, can be a real help. Not to mention the title and author of this book. So this book is called B'chol Levavcha, with all your heart, a commentary on the prayer book, and it is written by Rabbi Harvey J. Fields. It's published by CCAR Press from the Central Conference of American Rabbis. And the interesting thing about this commentary is that it's quite old already. This was published many decades ago, but it has been continually updated with new insights and new analyses, etc. And what it does is that it's a good companion to the Reform prayer book, Mishkan Tefillah, and it will talk you through the different prayers. But you can use it with any other prayer book as well. So all you need to know is the overall structure of the prayers, and you could also use it with Sim Shalom. Of course, this is the conservative prayer book, right? All you need to do is find the corresponding texts. Now, the texts in the conservative prayer book will be more traditional and lengthier. So you might not get every commentary on every text, but the key prayers will overlap very nicely. Another thing you can do to become more comfortable with Jewish prayer and lower your imposter feelings is get a children's prayer book. Every denomination has children's prayer books. You can get an Orthodox one or a Reform one or anything in between. And the Reform movement has published these children's prayer books. One is for youth and one is for children. This one is for younger children, and it's quite attractive and colorful, and it is also a great way to understand the basic structures of prayer and feel more comfortable with them. If you want to challenge yourself a little bit more as a beginner or someone who is deepening their connection to Jewish liturgy, then this prayer book for youth also works really well. So as you can see, it is just really attractive, and it contains contemporary readings, etc. So those are all some additional tips to lowering your nervousness or your anxiety about entering a Jewish prayer space by equipping yourself with accessible knowledge in order to make yourself feel more comfortable in the synagogue. Allowing yourself to understand the structures of the liturgy, of the worship experience, and of the cultural experience of Judaism can be very helpful. Also, remembering that there is nothing intuitive or instinctive about religion and culture. These are all forms of art. They are learned and trained practices for all of us. I once started as a newbie too. I remember I couldn't separate an aleph from a bet, and I stumbled into a synagogue, and oh boy. The last thing is to just not be afraid. When I speak to people about their first steps into a synagogue, whether they are entering that space as a new person or as a person who maybe doesn't come very often or who hasn't been in a long time, the overriding experience and emotion that people articulate is one of trepidation and fear. And it's absolutely heartbreaking. But it's also important to share that this fear is very, very common. So many Jews and non-Jews feel incredible kind of reservation about entering a Jewish space. Why? Well, that's a very complicated question, and I'm not going to go into that right now. But I do want to flag it up for you and let you know that if you're feeling that fear, don't have imposter bias over having imposter bias. It's really okay, and it is very, very common. So breathing your way through that fear, booking in activities or planning activities before or after your encounter with a Jewish space that makes you feel grounded, going with a friend, contacting the synagogue up in advance and asking, hey, can there be somebody there to help me and welcome me, are all good strategies for dealing with it. Finally, Judaism is incredibly rich and complex and multivocal and multivaried experience, and it's one of its blessings. And at the same time, that richness can also make it pretty daunting. Let's all fight our own imposter bias and help other people fight their imposter bias. It's normal to have, but I wish that we could have a little less of it so that we can all feel comfortable and welcome in Jewish spaces, because Jewish spaces want to be welcoming spaces, and they are incredible, life-giving, affirming spaces to be in, and we can all do a better job at making those spaces exactly that. Very good. If you are new to Judaism or new again to Judaism, I bless you that you may have as little imposter bias as you can. And family, that's really not what it's about. It's about your connection to a tradition and a culture and a faith and the people and the community and an experience of time and place that ground you and sanctify you and spark in you joy. Wishing everyone the most joyful path into Judaism that they can access. Thank you for being with this tea time today, and let's see what topic I can come up with next time. If you want me to address a particular topic, just let me know and I'll get on it. Bye!